This is The McGraw Show on KTRS.
All right, we got lots going on here. David Stokes with us, our good friend from the Show Me Institute. He's also a policy analyst. Good morning, David Stokes.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, David.
We give you as much time as possible. The most important thing is that you were a stable boy.
Shocking.
I was.
You walked behind the horses with a shovel?
Well, my father co-founded years and years ago one of the two downtown carriage companies. He got out of the business after a few years, but when the downtown carriages were first in St. Louis in the late 1980s, yeah, I was a stable boy for a few summers down there, cleaning up after them, riding them, driving them occasionally on special events.
So you were in a cab and coat, and how do you do? And
no, I never did the full-time driving on the most of it was at Laclede's Landing.
Okay.
So I never did that. I would drive them just sort of around, and more than driving the carriages, really rode the draft horses whenever I had a chance. That was the fun part of the job.
So
cleaning up after them was the miserable part of the job.
Watching this horse carriage controversy unfold, what are your thoughts as the former son of the owner of all these horse carriages companies?
Well, it's trying to take the personal out of it, but yeah, it's infuriating. I mean, these draft horses, that's what they do. They pull things. That's what they're bred for. That's what they're all about. They don't even dislike it. And yes, we should not be abusing them in 110-degree heat, but these owners don't do that. They don't. These draft horses are very large investments to train them, and when you have a good one, you need to treat them well and keep them for a while. The idea that they're out mistreating these horses is crazy. The idea that having them pull these carriages is abusive is crazy. That's not hard for a 2,000-pound draft horse to pull 3 or 4 people in a carriage.
It all joking aside, though, it points out is that, and this is what you bring up time and time again, and that is that one regulator has so much power that can basically just wipe out an entire company because they think you're doing something they don't like?
Well, can't put it any better than that, McGraw. It's terrifying. Yes, it's one regulator, in this case the health department chair in the city of St. Louis, who has clearly, through her own quotes in the paper, said she doesn't like this industry and would like to see it banned. I'm just quoting her in newspaper stories. And so in order to accomplish that, to whatever end, she really interfered with, I believe it was Brookfield Farms, was the original company, stopped them from operating one night, was completely wrong in her diagnosis of the horse, as the vet test a few days later proved beyond any doubt. And it's just terrifying that one person can jeopardize such a large investment, so many jobs, and something that most people like very much.
And a lot of people talk about, we were talking about this earlier, a lot of people talk about government getting in the way and government getting off our back. Is there anything worse than one government official just automatically deciding your business should be put out of business? And yet the outcry has been the silence has been deafening, right? I haven't heard a whole lot of politicians running to a microphone standing up for these poor people who are just trying to eke out a living making these carriage rides.
Well, I hope that behind the scenes, at least, people in the city are trying to point out to her that she doesn't have the power to do this. They're like banning this industry or enacting very strict regulations should be done by ordinance.
Right.
I don't think it should be done.
Right.
But if it's going to be done, it should be done by ordinance and by a law with committee hearings and this whole process we have known as passing bills and laws in America.
Right.
And it shouldn't be done by one regulator who has it in for one industry and wants to enact his or her will on a company.
Have we? I know that they were under a certain commission a while back. Are they under anyone right now? The horse and carriage industry in St. Louis. I can't recall.
It's a little unclear because they were under the Metropolitan Taxi Cab Commission, a group with its own issues.
Which still doesn't make sense to me that they would be under that.
But which I will admit appears to have at least previously done a decent job with the horse and carriage industry. So let's be fair here. And now they're not under that commission. So it makes sense that the existing regulations as set by law might be enforced by the health department. They do animal control in the city. But it makes no sense and is, as McGraw pointed out, frightening that they can just unilaterally expand their own regulations without any legal backing to do it, which is what they're trying to do.
All right, now on to the Taxi Cab Commission, because it sort of dovetails into that, which is What did they rule over the weekend, or this late last week, that Uber can come in, but only the high-end luxury sedan, and there's this minimum $25 fee that's sort of been floating out there?
And that's really the scary part, because what they did last week is some positive steps. Uber at least will be able to enact their premium sedan model business. Now, that's not everything that Uber does. It'll
Right.
still be kept out from their major sort of style of business, which is more like taxi cabs. But the Taxi Cab Commission made some changes. Most importantly, they removed the 60-minute rule, requiring that any premium sedan has to be booked more than an hour in advance. So that you can't just hail one at a hotel, because God forbid people hail a cab at a hotel, hail a premium sedan at a hotel, because that would be terrible. No, nevertheless, this was a good step.
Talk about an arbitrary rule.
Right, exactly. 59 minutes is okay, but
Right.
an hour and 1 minute is not, or vice versa.
Right.
But so they made a good step in the right direction, and it would allow Uber's premium sedan model to come in and operate in St. Louis. But there's still a good chance that next month that they're going to consider that they are going to consider it. There's a chance they'll do it, imposing a $25 minimum fare on any premium sedan ride, which would ruin Uber's business model, which is based on you need something short, you need something quick, you want a short-term quick ride,
Right.
take Uber. You can't do that with a $25 in St. Louis will basically
Right.
get you. In Manhattan, it might get you,
Right.
8 blocks, but in St. Louis, it basically covers the whole region.
Getting off the plane in New York, and I always take a taxi into the city, and they always have those sedan guys there. They're like, hey, you need a cab? And I'm always like, no, because I'm always petrified. I always think that's the start of a horror movie, right? Milhaven goes to New York, and all of a sudden he takes one of these premium services, and all of a sudden they they take me down to the docks and then dismantle me. So I never want to, I always want to, for some reason, I never take those premium services, because they're not allowed to do that at the airport, right? Even though they're just premium service sedans, they just don't have the legal right to do that at the airport.
They can't wait in line for rides at the airport. You have
Yeah.
to be called in advance and arranged ahead of time.
Right, yeah, it's sort of convoluted. So where does this stand? I guess the $64,000 question is, does the taxi commission have that much power that they can, is their power unchecked that they can just add these arbitrary rules and just sort of keep these companies out?
Yes, unlike the prior example of the health department and the horse industry, the horse and carriage industry, in this case, they do have this power. They do, set by state law, they do have the authority to enact these rules, unfortunately. That said, to their credit, this is a step in the right direction, and they need to go much, much further. Most of what Uber does is still not allowed. All of what Lyft does is not allowed. And we keep saying these two companies. There are just any St. Louis entrepreneur should be, it doesn't have to be these national companies. It could be your neighbor in St. Louis who wants to start a cab company via phones or apps or whatever. And they're not allowed to. So they have so much more to go to allow technology and competition to improve options for consumers in St. Louis, which is what this is all about. And they're still about restricting competition in favor of the current businesses. That said, at least with this last move, they're going in the right direction. Hopefully they will not impose this ridiculous minimum fee next month, which would be a step backwards.
All right. And lastly, you were at a convention in Detroit?
I was at a conference on urban government, urban affairs in Detroit last week. That's why I was
That's an
out
interesting
of the
place
show.
to hold urban development in a place like Detroit.
Well, it was my first time in Detroit. I'd never stayed in the city before.
Yeah.
And the conference was about urban failure. So
Oh, okay. Maybe it was a great
So
place
it's
to go.
appropriate then.
Right, but it was also about how in the case of Detroit right now, it's about how you can find private businesses and individual citizens, many of them the citizens with unbelievable courage, who are trying to revitalize their own neighborhoods. And the point of the conference is that at least this latest, and they admitted at the very beginning, this is probably the fourth revitalization of Detroit, and the prior four were total failures. So, but hopefully this one, which is based on private businesses like Quicken Loans buying skyscraper after skyscraper in Detroit, and neighborhood activists like some of the people we met when we traveled the city, just working in their own neighborhood, that maybe there's some hope to some change. Rick Edlund, our colleague at Show Me Institute, who so many of your listeners remember,
Yeah.
wrote an op-ed for the Show Me Institute about 2 years ago on why he doesn't think St. Louis is the next Detroit after Detroit went into bankruptcy. It was more about a year ago. Nonetheless, after seeing Detroit, I think Rick was totally right. We have our issues in St. Louis and in St. Louis City, but it's nothing like Detroit has.
Is Detroit using any government help? Are there any TIFs or taxes or tax credits or anything to help these people out?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a huge state involvement in trying to help Detroit through what it's going for. And yes, when Quicken Loans buys these skies, as the company says, it's like people are willing to sell them a parking garage and say, oh, take this skyscraper while you're at it.
Right.
So they're just gobbling up. And other people are too, starting to, thankfully. But yeah, they do get tax incentives as well because the taxes and the licensing system, that's one of the reasons I think St. Louis, Kansas City, they've got problems, but it's nowhere near that. They were talking about the license to operate a new business in Detroit measured in years, not days or weeks.
Right.
And how hard it is for entrepreneurs to get going there.
More on that on the Show Me Institute blog, your blog?
I'm going to get something up on it. Was in Detroit for a while for this conference, really learned a lot and had a great time at it.
How do we find you at the Show Me Institute?
ShowMeInstitute.org, ShowMeDaily.org is our blog. We've got a lot up on Uber, Lyft, and other issues that we've talked about. And you can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
David, be good. How long did your dad own the horse and buggy business for?
We was co-owner of it,
Yeah.
and just for a couple of years.
Just a couple of years.
Yeah.
So he made his fortune and then got out.
He did. He most definitely did not. He did not make any type of a fortune. But I had a great time. We were sort of crazy. We'd just get on these draft horses and ride them through downtown St. Louis bareback. I mean, that was, upon reflection, it was quite stupid to be riding a 2,000-pound horse bareback.
You were riding bareback on the streets of St. Louis?
With just a rope around it to guide it. Type of thing I would never allow my kids to do. But I had fun doing it back then.
Sounds like
You were just a rebel.
sounds like you were Lady you were Lady Godiva of some kind.
It's a strange image, but sure.
Well,
we'll go for it.
I still have that. I was picturing the naked bike ride and the naked bike ride horses, and then you were riding a horse, and it got all confused in my head. You should hear the things I don't say. 850 KTRS.
Thanks, McGraw. Thanks,
You got it.
Kelly.
Thanks.